job of the first draft is to be done, and we're on the way to get this first draft done. Who ends up on an alien TV show with his cat, Princess Donuts, in this dungeon? Why do we search for the perfect writing spot in Edinburgh? So I am still writing. Perfect opening. If you're new here, I am currently writing the sequel to my debut book. I am going to break this chair. Harbinger of Justice. I think I'm currently sitting at about 12,000 words, which is probably just south of 10%. But I'm planning on getting that up to at least 20,000 this week. But I am really happy with what I've got so far. It's not good. It's a first draft, so it's not good. But I can see the story, and that's good enough. But let's go make some coffee, and then we'll get some more writing done. So I get a lot of questions about what software I use. For outlining, I do just use a notebook. I had tried some other software for outlining because a lot of them have this type of block node structure where you can put down a block and connect it to another block, and you could have branching and notes, so you could use that for different chapters and help move them about and structure them for the outline. However, none of it really worked for me, so I still just outline in a notebook. As for drafting, I'm currently using Scrivener. I'm sure it has a ton of features that I just don't use, but I just really like how it's laid out. It's really good for compartmentalizing chapters and also branches of the story. It's really easy to move chapters about and restructure parts of the story, which is really helpful when you're not writing in narrative order. Which for book 1, I did write everything in order for the most part. However, book 2, I am writing it in branches of the story. And just this ability of being able to move chapters about is just really helpful. You can also flag them and change the icons. So if you had different point of views, you can have them as different icons, or different drafts, you can have them as different icons to keep track of how far you are through a draft. And I like that you can set up session word count goals. It's a good visual for when you're writing to see how far you are on the goal that you set for that day. However, Word is the standard. So I do render out to Word usually around draft 3. One, to see it in a different software, which does help for picking up on typos and things like that. It's also why some authors change the font when they change to a different draft. Just seeing the words under a new light really helps with picking out problems, but also because most editors prefer Word files. It means they can do the track changes feature and apply comments to your manuscript. Word still seems to be the industry standard, but it is fun to test out other softwares and try out different options. Some of them can get pretty pricey, so if you're not looking to spend any money and you have Word, just use that. Probably end up converting it to Word if you use another software anyway when you give it off to your editor. As for world building and note keeping, my process is a complete mess at the moment. I did try a couple different softwares and they just didn't work for me. I did like the layout of quite a few of them and I used them for a little while, but I got really bad at not keeping them up to date. So most of the world building aspects were just kept in my head, or I had notes, scattered notes on my phone that I pulled together. However, now that I'm working on book 2, I can see this was a mistake. I really need to see how I spelt certain terms and words, and just having a list of things like the deities, who all have very similar type names. Brain no that good. Equally, having a master character list I find to be really helpful, especially in this series. I have a naming convention where the length of your name implies your social standing, so a lot of characters have very short 3-letter names, and I need to make sure that they're distinguishable and that I don't have the same name for 2 characters. And it was actually my brother who pointed out this software. It's called Obsidian. It's completely free and it's super powerful. I am only using the most basic features in this application, but there seems to be a lot of features that I think, once I learn how to use them, will be very useful in building up this encyclopedia of world building for this series. It kind of uses this half-coded type hotkey language, a bit like Discord. So if you use 2 square brackets, enter a name or a phrase or a place, and then close it out with the same, you will make a file with that name that you can then click on to this separate text file. So you can see how you can build this sort of database structure for your world building, your characters, your flora and fauna, locations. So as things have arrived while I'm writing book 2, I am going back to book 1 to find exactly how I did something or spelled a certain word, and then I'm filling out this database, which has already become very useful when writing the second book. And because it's completely free, I do highly recommend you at least test it out. It seems to be a very complicated software, but if you are just using the basic features, it's really straightforward, and then over time you can learn these new features and try and incorporate them in your system. This isn't sponsored or anything, I just really like the software. The only frustrating aspect is trying to get it online is very difficult. This is where things like Google Docs is maybe a better way of going, because then you can update it on your phone and on the go on different devices. Or Evernote, that's another really good one. Whereas Obsidian is just localized, which means only on the one machine. There is a way to attach it to the cloud and get it on different devices, but it seems quite complicated. But given that I do all my writing on my laptop, I'm just putting the world building doc on here, so it's not that big a deal for me. I can just make a notes on my phone and then update the file later on. So yes, I'm using Scrivener to draft, then exporting to Word to then maybe do a draft before I send off to the editor, and I'm using Obsidian for now. I'm not sure if this will stick for my world building. As for writing today, I did about 1,900 words, bringing the total up to just over 14,000 words. So the goal was to get 2,000 words, but I'm at a really good stopping point, so I'm going to stop there. So we're on track. We're on track. The job of the first draft is to be done, and we're on the way to get this first draft done. Making it good is a future Andrew problem. We're just getting words down. Can't remember who said it, but someone said that the first draft is telling the story to yourself, and I really do like that idea, because that's how it feels like to me. You're just discovering the story yourself, and then you can sharpen it and make it readable for others in the future drafts. So earlier in the video I did mention that I'm writing book 2 out of order. And the reason for that is, book 2 follows 2 characters. In fact, the whole series has 2 main characters, and that is Naya and Rai. And originally when I was working on the first draft of this book, Harbinger of Justice, Rai was the main character. I was going to have quite a bit of his backstory in this first book, because this whole trilogy, he was meant to be the main character, and Naya was almost like a secondary main character. And we do have a couple other POVs, and we will get more POVs in book 2 and 3. However, these 2 are the main characters of this trilogy. I can't remember if I was drafting or if I was working on the outline, but I was reading a book, I think it was Save the Cat, and I don't remember the exact line, but it was something like, your main character should be the character that goes through the most in that book. And I looked back at my outline, I thought, Naya goes through way more in this first book than Rai does. So I kind of shifted the focus more onto Naya's story. This is very much the coming of age story for her in this first book, kind of. It's the start of her story is what I mean by that. And you get enough about Rai that you know his motivations and a bit about his backstory. You do get pieces of it. However, you don't get a lot of his backstory. Whereas in book 2, there's 3 legs to the story. There is modern day Rai, modern day Naya, and also a past Rai sequence. And that flashback past sequence for Rai is the arc of the story I'm working on right now. And the sun's coming out and I'm completely blown out. Cool, cool, cool. When I was writing book 1, I did alternate between writing Naya's point of view and then Rai's and then back to Naya. Occasionally I wrote 2 or 3 chapters in a row for one if I just wanted to keep going with that part of the story. But for the most part, I actually quite enjoyed swapping between the 2 different characters' heads. It means you weren't stuck in one character's head for too long. But because this is a flashback sequence, I want this to relate quite heavily to the stuff that's happening in modern day. And while I have outlined both and I know exactly what's happening in both, some of the smaller details like the character relations, maybe experiences they had, different scenes, I'd really like to be able to pull on that in the modern day sequences, so it makes sense to do the flashback arc of the story first and then move on to the modern day stuff with Rai and Naya. So I thought jumping into this sequel, it would be pretty straightforward because I know the world, I know the characters. Let's just get on, get some words down. However, on top of that kind of building up the momentum of getting back into writing, I'm also trying to discover this voice for Rai's past, because he does change so much as a character. His past sequences have to be a different voice and tone than his modern day stuff. But not only that, I do need to slowly turn it into modern day Rai's tone and style of writing. And while this is still very much first draft, super messy, needs a lot of work before I let anyone read it, I'm actually pretty happy with how it's turning out so far. There's certain things that I come across when I'm writing that I would never be able to if I was sitting just trying to outline and plan a story. Just for an example, there is a term that Rai uses in book 1, and it fit really well into this early situation in his flashbacks from a different character telling him the same thing. So it kind of shows you where he picked up that idea. And also it's interesting because you can kind of flip it on its head, and Rai really didn't like the idea and the term when he first heard it. But the fact that as a reader you know that he does use it later on in the future really tells of this, it implies this kind of arc and this change in his character that's not necessarily for the good. And that's where discovery writing comes into its own for me, because I would never have been able to sit down and think that up. But when it came up naturally in the story, I thought, that's a good idea. I'm going to lean into that. I apologise. The light is just not playing ball at all today. So I've written about 1,500 words today. I'm going to smash out another 500 words at least this afternoon. And tonight is the last night for the Edinburgh Book Festival, and I'm going to a talk with R.F. Kuang. So I'm super excited about that, especially because I just finished Yellowface fairly recently. Kinda wish I read Babel before this because it is about the English language, and I know that book talks about translation as a huge theme of it. But I'm still super excited to hear her talk. So the show was really interesting. I don't think you're allowed to film, so I didn't film anything, but it was 3 different authors, and the title was The History of Language. It wasn't quite as structured as a discussion on that topic. The interviewer kind of asked the 3 authors different questions about their own work that kind of related to that as a bigger overarching topic. I wasn't familiar with the other 2 authors, but Rebecca talked a lot about translation and stuff to do with her book Babel, which is frustrating because I've only read Yellowface. I really wish I'd read Babel before going to see this. You didn't need to have read it, but I would have added to the discussion. But she just kind of talked a little bit about this fact that translation is a reductive process. I don't think she used that terminology exactly, but that's kind of what I got from it, and how something is always lost in the act of translation, and how the translator can put in their own, or always does put in their own bias and personal experience and interpretation into the translation, which is a really interesting topic, and it really makes me want to read Babel now. So it was a good talk. I did really enjoy it. And it was the last talk of the Edinburgh Book Festival this year. What's really funny is it's quite a highbrow conversation. It's quite, they talk about how impressive language is and all these fun aspects to do with language. And I was listening to an audiobook on the way in and on the way back called Dungeon Crawler Carl. I keep on wanting to call him Dan, and I don't know why. And it's about this guy who ends up on an alien TV show, survival TV show, with his cat, Princess Donuts, in this dungeon. And all he's wearing is like a leather jacket and his wife's Crocs. It's a really bizarre book, but it's fantastic. But just the contrast between the talk and my audiobook while I was listening to on the way in and on the way back on the bus, it didn't quite jive. As for writing, I did kind of fail the idea of this video, which was going to be 10k words in a week. I'm at 8k and it's now Tuesday of the following week. I had some stuff come up and I couldn't write for a couple days, so I kind of missed the mark on that one. However, the plan for today is to get that up to the 20k. And I also have a little bit of a mission today as well. Occasionally I wrote when I was away for a weekend or something, but for the most part, 95% of this book was written in my house. However, I know a lot of authors do go out and write in coffee shops and things. I've never tried it, but I do think that will make the video more appealing to watch. It's more visually appealing than just me sitting at my desk typing away. So seeing as we're on a mission to get this last 2k, I thought, why don't we search for the perfect writing spot in Edinburgh? And I think I already know where it is. There is a Waterstones on Princess Street, which is kind of like bang in the centre of Edinburgh, and this looks onto the castle, and at the top of the Waterstones there is a cafe. So I think, you know, sitting in a Waterstones, looking upon Edinburgh Castle, sunny today, that's where we're going to get the last 2k words in. And not only that, but R.F. Kuang did put up on her Instagram a little alcove of her sitting, saying that this is like the perfect writing spot. So in particular, we're going to try and find that alcove. I actually know of a couple authors that have written in that alcove, so I'm kind of hoping it has a magic energy that I'm just going to osmosis words to me so I know what to write for the last 2,000 words. So that's the mission. We're going out. I'm going to pretend I do leave the house occasionally. It's going to be good. Let's do it. So it seems like everybody had the same idea because the sun was out and Waterstones was full. That being said, because it was so nice, I did get some writing done in Princess Street Gardens and then in a coffee shop. So I'll have to return to find that perfect writing spot another day. But I did cross the 10k words for this video. And I must say, I'm pretty surprised because I did think going out was going to be more for this video and I might not be as productive as at home. But that was not the case at all. For the amount of time I was sitting writing, compared to the word count I got down, I was very happy with that. So going out and writing in coffee shops is definitely something that I will do more of in the future. And it was just a fun day out. So if you're a writer and like me, I've done most of your writing inside at home, I highly recommend just going out and writing out and about. Ton of fun and productive. It's a win-win. That'll do it for today. Thank you very much for watching. I know these writing videos are a wee bit more niche than my other book videos. However, they're a ton of fun to make and it does keep me consistent. But thank you very much for watching. Outro. And for the outro, we're going to get a meg shot because that's always a good outro.